Hello friends, welcome back to another video. Today I will talk about classical liberal theory of democracy. In this lecture, I will cover several points. At first, I will cover background of democracy, then origin of classical liberal theory of democracy, then basic principles of classical liberal theory, and lastly I will cover the relevance of classical liberal theory of democracy. So, what is the background of democracy? The birthplace of democracy was ancient Greece. Democracy had started its journey from ancient Greece about 2500 years ago. In that time, Greece was divided into small city-states. Athens was the city-state where we find the practice of democratic system of government. All adult citizens had to take an active role in governmental process. Each year, 500 names were drawn from a poll of all the citizens of ancient Athens. Those 500 citizens had to serve for 1 year. During that year, they were responsible for making new laws and for changing old laws as they saw fit. But nothing they did become law until all the citizens of Athens had a chance to vote yes or no. To vote, citizens had to attend the assembly on the day the vote was taken. It was not a secret, but you had to be present to vote. This is the example of a majority ruled government. It was a great example of direct democracy. It is one of their finest gifts from the Greeks to us, but it was not a fully democratic which we see in present time. During the time in Athens, women and slaves were not considered as a citizen. They could not participate in any government process. Origin of classical liberal theory of democracy. The idea of classical liberal theory of democracy was given by the four prominent scholars. They are John Locke, Adam Smith, Montesquieu, and J.S. Mill. At first, we have to know what liberal means. Then it will be easy to understand the liberal point of view to democracy. The core area of liberal theory is liberty, which is derived from the Latin word liber, which means free. Liberty refers to political and civil freedom. So it is clear that the basis of liberal theory is liberty. Now the question is, liberty for whom and liberty of what? Though Hobbes, who started the individualistic analysis in his social contract theory, he had elaborated human nature in the state of nature. But he did not give the priority to individual. It was John Locke who was considering as a father of liberal theory, because he was the first political thinker whose central point of thought was individual liberty. Now we have found the answer of the first question, that was liberty of whom? It is individual. It is liberty of individual. Then the second question was liberty of what? Now I will highlight some feature of John Locke's idea of political liberty. We all know that John Locke is a British political thinker who is popular in his social contract theory, which is elaborated in his famous book, Two Treatises of Government. It was published in 1689. In his theory of social contract, he had pointed out that people are reasonable by nature and they have natural rights of life, liberty and property. Government should protect those rights of life, liberty and property. And lastly, government power comes from the consent of the people. Now we have found the answer of the second question, which was liberty of what? That is liberty of choosing own life and property. And it is the duty of the government to protect those liberty. From these 3 points, we find some feature of democracy, that is liberty of individual, minimal government, which is based on consent of the people, That means government bound to protect people's right to life, liberty and property. So it is clear that it was the John Locke who was the first who delivered us the concept of liberal theory of democracy. Then the next prominent thinker was Adam Smith. In his famous book The Wealth of Nation, he described the state as a minimal state. He gave the concept of laissez-faire, which refers to autonomy of market. That means state has not any control over market. So we find that classical liberal theory also emphasizes on the free economy and minimal state. The next classical liberal thinker was Montesquieu. In his famous book The Spirit of Laws, gave the concept of separation of power, which means the power is divided governmental authority into three branches. These are legislative, executive and judiciary. In US Constitution, you can find the separation of power, but there is a check and balance which prevent the misuse of the power of every branch. Today in every democratic country, we find these three branches with its equal relevance. The next liberal political philosopher was John Stuart Mill. In his book On Liberty, he said that over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign. That means the state can't control over individual because it is barrier of the individual development. So, what are the basic principles of the classical liberal theory of democracy? Peter H. Merkel, in his Political Continuity and Change, has described four principles of classical liberal theory. The first one is democracy is a government by consent. Without consent of the citizens, no government can run. Second one is democracy is the majority rule, which means the decision in the legislatures, committees, cabinets and the executive or regulative bodies are taken by the majority vote on the principles of one man, one vote. Third one is recognition of minority rights. Minorities may be racial, religious, linguistic or cultural, but there is not to be any harassment of those minorities. The last principles he describes that liberal democracy is constitutional government, which means a government by laws and not by any man. Besides these principles, there have many principles of classical liberal theory of democracy, like universal suffrage for voting rights, representative government, protection of individual rights, the separation and autonomy of judiciary from legislature and executive branch of the government, multiple political party and existence of interest group are necessary, freedom of press, etc. The relevance of classical liberal theory of democracy. It is the assumptions of the classical liberal theory of the democracy that election is a process by which the general masses are given an opportunity to participate in the political system and election results reflect the public opinion. The will of the people is expressed through the vote and the right to vote makes the people responsible and saves them from frustration. Classical liberalism focuses minimal state and support to free market. In 21st century, we see that every democratic country looks forward through the privatization of public sectors. But it is the duty of the government for the development of weaker section in the society. Welfare of all is the key of a successful democratic country. In this era of 21st century, we can see the democratic country in the eye of liberalism. Liberalism triumphed over all the other theories. So thank you friends for watching this video. For more video, please do subscribe our channel.